When Darius Cole walked into that small Mississippi bar, he wanted peace, not a fight. But hate had other plans. A racist gang led by Troy Harlan spotted him, a lone black man, and thought they'd found easy prey. Drunk on arrogance, they pulled a gun, eager to make him flinch. What they didn't know was that Darius was a retired Delta Force commander, a man who'd faced death in places they couldn't imagine. When he moved, it was swift, precise, unstoppable. Seconds later, the same men who'd laughed at him were on their knees, begging for their lives. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The whiskey glass landed on the bar with a dull thud. Lyle's hands trembled as he poured, spilling a few drops on the scratched wood. His eyes darted between Darius and the corner table, where Troy Harlan's crew was getting louder by the second. Darius took a slow sip, letting the burn settle in his throat. 20 years of combat had taught him to read a room, and right now every instinct told him this place was a powder keg. The smell of stale beer and cigarettes hung in the air, mixed with something darker, the scent of threat and hatred. "Hey, boy," Troy's voice cut through the quiet. "You lost or something? This here's a private establishment." Darius didn't turn around. He watched Lyle instead, noting how the old bartender's shoulders hunched as if preparing for a blow. The rest of the bar had gone silent, like an audience waiting for the show to begin. "I said, you hearing me, boy?" Troy's voice got closer. Boot heels scraped against the wooden floor. Darius took another sip. "I hear just fine, and I'm not your boy." A rough laugh erupted from the corner table. Bo Beast Tanner, a mountain of a man with scarred knuckles and dead eyes, stood up. His chair scraped back with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Well, listen to that fancy talk. You think you're better than us?" "Leave it be," Lyle muttered, so quietly only Darius could hear. "These boys, they're looking for trouble." The Palmer twins, Rick and Denny, flanked Troy as he swaggered closer. Their matching sneers seemed practiced, like they'd spent years perfecting their roles as backup muscle. Earl hung back, hand resting near his belt, where Darius had already spotted the outline of a concealed weapon. "This is my daddy's bar," Troy announced, his words slightly slurred. He was maybe 6 feet away now. "And we got standards here, don't we, boys?" "That's right," Rick Palmer chimed in, his voice high and eager. "We sure do." "Standards," Denny echoed, and they both laughed like it was the cleverest joke they'd heard all year. Darius set his glass down carefully. The liquid inside barely rippled. His hands were steady, just as they'd been in 100 combat situations. He studied his reflection in the mirror behind the bar, taking in the scene behind him. 5 men, all armed in some way, all looking for an excuse. The odds weren't great, but he'd faced worse. "Your daddy's bar," Darius said slowly. "Would that be Sheriff Buck Harlan?" Troy's face darkened. "You know my daddy? I knew this place when your grandfather owned it." Darius turned on his stool, facing them directly for the first time. "Back when my father used to drink here. Before he died." Recognition flickered across Lyle's face. The old bartender stepped back, his complexion going ashen. He'd been here that night, Darius realized. He'd seen what happened. "Well, ain't this something special?" Bo rumbled, cracking his knuckles. "A homecoming. You Cole's boy?" "The one who hung himself?" Rick asked, and Denny snickered. "That's what the report said," Troy drawled, moving closer. His breath reeked of cheap bourbon. "Real tragic. Some folks just can't handle their place in the world." Darius felt the familiar calm settling over him, the combat clarity that had kept him alive through 3 wars. His muscles relaxed instead of tensing. His breathing remained steady. He saw everything with crystal sharpness, the sweat on Troy's upper lip, The way Bo's right foot was planted for a quick move, the nervous twitching of Earl's trigger finger. "My father never hung himself," Darius said quietly. "And you know it." Troy leaned in close, his lips pulled back in a snarl. "You calling my daddy a liar?" "I'm calling it what it is." Darius didn't move, didn't raise his voice. "Murder." The word hung in the air like smoke. Lyle dropped a glass, the crash making everyone jump except Darius. The bartender scrambled to clean up the mess, his hands shaking worse than ever. "Boys," Troy said, stepping back, "I think we got ourselves a problem here. This gentleman is suggesting that the law in this town ain't honest." He reached for his back pocket. "That's a serious accusation. Might need to take this somewhere private to discuss it proper." "You should listen to your friend," Bo added, nodding at Lyle. "Some folks don't know when to walk away." The Palmer twins spread out, blocking the path to the door. Earl shifted his weight, ready to move. The trap was closing, just as they'd planned. They'd done this before, Darius realized. This was their routine. Corner someone, provoke them, then drag them out back for a lesson. But they'd never cornered someone like him before. Someone who'd spent decades learning the art of violence, who knew exactly how many ways a human body could break. Someone who had nothing left to lose. "Last chance," Troy said, pulling out a snub-nosed .38 revolver. "Walk out now, or we'll help you leave. Your choice." Darius kept his eyes on Troy's revolver, noting the poor maintenance, rust near the cylinder, worn grips suggesting careless handling. These men were amateurs playing at violence. He'd seen real killers, and they didn't swagger or sneer. "What? Nothing to say?" Troy taunted, waving the gun. "Cat got your tongue, boy?" The Palmer twins laughed on cue, their identical faces twisted with cruel anticipation. Behind them, other patrons slipped out quietly, leaving only Lyle frozen behind the bar, a rag clutched in his trembling hands. "I'm giving you one chance," Darius said quietly. "Walk away." Bo stepped closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over the bar. Mighty bold talk for a man about to get ventilated. "Yeah," Rick Palmer chimed in, emboldened by numbers. "We been teaching lessons round here since before you was born." His brother Denny nodded eagerly, already reaching for a pool cue. Darius lifted his glass, ignoring the circle of threats closing in. The whiskey caught the dim light, amber liquid steady in his grip. 23 years of combat had taught him patience. Wait for the moment. Let them make the first mistake. Troy's face reddened at being ignored. "Hey! I'm talking to you!" He slapped the glass from Darius's hand, sending it crashing against the wall. Whiskey splattered across the Confederate flag hanging there, dark drops like blood on gray cloth. The bar fell silent. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Darius stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. He was shorter than Troy, but something in his posture made the younger man step back. Combat instinct, honed in 100 firefights, tracked every potential threat. Bo's weight on his right foot, telegraphing a haymaker. The Palmer twins' nervous energy, ready to lash out. Earl by the door, hand still hovering near his own concealed weapon. "Boy, you better," Troy started, but Darius cut him off. "I'm not your boy." His voice carried the quiet authority of command. "I'm Major Darius Cole, United States Army, retired. Delta Force, and you're about to make a serious mistake." Troy blinked, alcohol-fueled bravado warring with sudden uncertainty. Then he sneered and pressed the revolver against Darius's chest. "Delta Force? That's supposed to scare me? This here's my town. My rules." "Last warning," Darius said softly. "Think very carefully about your next move." Troy's finger tightened on the trigger. The hammer clicked back and stuck. The revolver's mechanism, neglected and rusty, jammed solid. Time slowed. Before Troy could process what happened, Darius moved. His left hand clamped around Troy's gun hand, fingers finding pressure points that sent lightning bolts of pain through the wrist. His right hand twisted the revolver free as Troy's grip spasmed open. A pivot of the hips, a sweep of the leg, and Troy was airborne. He crashed through a table, bottles and glasses exploding around him. The bar erupted. Bo launched his telegraphed haymaker. Darius slipped inside the punch, hammering 3 precise strikes: solar plexus, throat, knee. The mountain of a man folded like wet cardboard. Rick Palmer swung the pool cue. Darius caught it, yanked him forward, and drove an elbow into his temple. As Rick dropped, Denny charged with a roar. A quick sidestep, a hip throw learned in close-quarters combat training, and Denny joined his brother on the floor. Earl finally drew his hidden pistol. Darius was already moving. 2 steps across broken glass, a grip learned from Iranian commandos, and Earl's gun hand snapped backward at an impossible angle. His scream cut short as Darius's knee found his diaphragm. 5 seconds. 5 men down. Darius stood in the center of the destruction, breathing steady, eyes alert for further threats. Troy tried to rise, cradling his broken wrist. You can't! Darius ejected the revolver's cylinder. Let the bullets fall to the floor with soft plinks. He aimed the empty gun at the groaning men. "Wrong," he said. "I can. You boys picked the wrong man to threaten tonight." The Palmer twins huddled together, blood streaming from Rick's scalp. Bo lay gasping, clutching his throat. Earl sobbed, cradling his shattered hand. "Please," Troy whimpered, all pretense of authority gone. "Don't kill us. Please." "Begging already?" Darius's voice carried across the silent bar. "What happened to all that tough talk?" "We're sorry," Denny Palmer blubbered. "We didn't know." "That's right, you didn't know. You saw skin color and thought you found an easy target. Instead, you found someone who spent 2 decades learning exactly how to deal with men like you." He placed Troy's empty revolver on the bar. The sound of metal on wood made them all flinch. "Next time," Darius said, straightening his jacket, "choose your fights better. Because if there is a next time, I won't be so gentle." He walked to the door, boots crunching on broken glass. The entire bar watched him go. Lyle, the remaining patrons, the groaning men on the floor. Their eyes held fear, yes, but something else, too. Recognition. Understanding. They'd just witnessed the difference between practiced cruelty and professional violence, between bullies and a warrior. The humid night air hit him as he stepped outside. Behind him, he heard Troy's sob of pain, the shuffle of bodies being helped up, the murmur of shocked voices. But Darius didn't look back. He'd made his point. Now it was time to wait for the real fight to begin. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Darius navigated the potholed streets of Ashfield's black neighborhood, where streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. His mother's house, his house now, loomed ahead, a dark shape against the star-filled Mississippi sky. The adrenaline from the bar was fading, leaving behind a familiar emptiness. He'd felt it after every mission, every firefight. That hollow space where survival instinct gave way to memory. Inside, he didn't bother with lights. The moonlight through dusty windows was enough. He sank into his father's old armchair, its springs groaning with age. From his wallet, he pulled out a worn photograph. Jeremiah Cole on his best day, standing proud in his Sunday suit outside the factory gates. "You always said stand tall," Darius whispered to the image, "even when they want you to kneel." The memory hit him like a physical blow. He was 12 again, watching his father address the workers outside the Harlan manufacturing plant. Jeremiah Cole's voice carried across the crowd, steady and strong despite the summer heat. "We ain't asking for special treatment," his father had declared. "Just what's right. Same pay for same work. Safety equipment that actually works. And respect, because we're men, same as anyone else." Sheriff Buck Harlan had been there that day, younger, but just as mean. His badge gleamed as he fingered his gun belt. "You're causing trouble, Cole. Making waves where you ought not." "The only trouble," Jeremiah had replied, "is pretending nothing's wrong while good people suffer." 3 days later, they found Jeremiah's body hanging in the old cotton mill. The official report called it suicide. But Darius remembered his mother's face at the funeral. Her words whispered into his hair as she held him. "They killed him for being proud, baby. For standing up straight when they wanted him bent." Darius set the photo down and moved to the stack of boxes in the corner. His mother had kept everything: letters, documents, newspaper clippings. Each box held pieces of a past he'd tried to outrun through military service. In the third box, beneath a stack of old bills, he found it. A manila envelope, sealed with aged tape. Inside was a police report, the paper yellowed, but the words still clear. Sheriff Buck Harlan's signature sprawled across the bottom, declaring Jeremiah Cole's death a clear case of self-termination due to financial troubles. "Lies," Darius muttered. His father had been many things: stubborn, fierce, principled, but never suicidal. He'd had too much pride, too much fight in him. The report listed the evidence: a rope, a kicked-over chair, a suspicious amount of cash in Jeremiah's wallet. But what it didn't mention spoke volumes. No investigation into the bruises on his father's hands. No questions about the boot prints in the mill's dust that didn't match Jeremiah's shoes. No explanation for why a proud man would choose to die in the same place where local clan members had once held their meetings. Darius spread the papers across the coffee table, piecing together the truth he'd always suspected. This wasn't just about his father anymore. The report mentioned other suicides, all black men who'd stood up to the Harlans, all ruled death by their own hand. The phone's shrill ring cut through his concentration. Few people had this number, his mother's old landline that he'd kept connected out of habit. Major Cole. Reverend Samuel Miles's voice crackled with age and urgency. "I heard about what happened at Harlan's bar. News travels fast. In Ashfield? Like lightning through a storm cloud." The old preacher paused. "You need to know something, son. Buck Harlan, he ain't the kind to let his boy get humiliated without answering back. And Troy, he's meaner than his daddy, with less sense to control it. I'm not afraid of them, Reverend. Didn't say you should be, but being ready ain't the same as being afraid." Another pause, heavy with meaning. "Your daddy wasn't afraid either. That's what got him killed." Darius straightened. "You know something about that night?" "Know lots of things. Been keeping records for 30 years. Every cross-burning, every beating, every suicide that wasn't. Come by the church tomorrow. There's things you need to see." A flash of movement caught Darius's eye. Through the window, he spotted headlights. A truck idling across the street, its engine a low growl in the night silence. "I see, I've got visitors," Darius said quietly. "Lord, have mercy." The Reverend's voice tightened. "Be careful, son. This town's got more ghosts than graves, and some of them still wear badges. I'll call you tomorrow." Darius hung up, his eyes never leaving the truck. His hand found the familiar grip of his combat knife, secured in its sheath at his belt. 23 years of war had taught him to never go unarmed, even in peace. Especially in peace. The truck's headlights painted yellow squares on his living room wall, watching, waiting. Inside the cab, shadows moved. More than one person. They were testing him, seeing if he'd run or fight. Darius stood in the darkness, knife ready, father's photo still on the table beside the damning police report. The choice between running and fighting had been made long ago, in a 12-year-old boy's heart, as he watched them lower his father's casket. The screen door creaked as Darius stepped onto his front porch. The night air hung thick with humidity, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and distant rain. His boots crunched on loose gravel as he walked toward the fence, where fresh red spray paint gleamed under the streetlight. Trash. The letters dripped like blood, still wet. Someone had taken their time, wanting him to know they weren't afraid to get close. He moved to his truck, running his hand along the cold metal. All 4 tires lay flat, deep knife slashes in the rubber. Amateur work. Angry cuts made by someone who'd never had to fight for real. 20 minutes later, Darius pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Ashfield Sheriff's Department. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across faded wanted posters and outdated civic notices. Behind the front desk, instead of the usual deputy, sat Sheriff Buck Harlan himself. "Well now," Buck drawled, looking up from a manila folder, "if it ain't the returning hero." His smile didn't reach his pale blue eyes. "What brings a decorated veteran like yourself to my humble office?" Darius stood at parade rest, shoulders square. Vandalism and property damage to report. "That so?" Buck's weathered face creased with false concern. He wore his authority like cologne, too strong, meant to overwhelm. Shame about that. "Town ain't what it used to be." "Town's exactly what it used to be," Darius replied evenly. "That's the problem." Buck's smile tightened. He closed the folder and leaned back, his chair squeaking. A gold cross hung from his neck, catching the fluorescent glare. "Now, before we get to your complaint, might as well address the elephant in the room. That unfortunate business with my boy Troy. Your boy pulled a gun on me. That's attempted murder. Law enforcement officers can draw their weapons when they feel threatened." Buck's voice dripped honey-coated venom. "Troy's a deputy, after all, and you, well, you've got quite the record for violence. All them kills in Afghanistan, Iraq. PTSD's a hell of a thing. We both know that gun wasn't official business. Do we?" Buck stood slowly, his considerable height meant to intimidate. "Way I hear it, a peaceful gathering at Harlan's bar was disrupted by an aggressive outsider. My boy's wrist is broken. Rick Palmer's got 3 cracked ribs. That ain't the kind of behavior we tolerate in Ashfield. And what kind do you tolerate, Sheriff?" Darius met his stare. "Lynchings called suicides. Cross-burnings ruled as teenage pranks." Something cold flickered in Buck's eyes. "You're treading dangerous ground, son. Your daddy never did learn when to back down neither. Look where that got him. Are you threatening me?" "Lord, no." Buck spread his hands, all theatrical innocence. "Just offering friendly advice. Ashfield's got a certain way about it. Natural order of things. Folks who try to change that order, well, they tend to have accidents. History has a way of repeating itself around here." "I'll remember that," Darius said quietly. "When the FBI comes asking questions, get out of my office." The honey vanished from Buck's voice. "And boy, next time something gets vandalized, try calling a repair shop instead of wasting my time." The Moonlight Diner sat on the edge of town, its neon sign buzzing in the gathering dusk. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and grease. Darius slid into a corner booth, positioning himself to watch both entrances. Old habits died hard. "Mind if I join you?" A woman stood beside his table, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and a reporter's notebook. Her accent carried hints of Texas beneath careful professionalism. "Elena Vega," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm a journalist. Or was. until the Ashfield Herald fired me for writing about police brutality. Not interested in interviews. What about justice? She leaned forward. Word's already spreading about what happened at Harlan's bar. A black veteran standing up to the sheriff's son. People are talking. Talk is cheap in this town. But evidence isn't. Elena pulled out her phone, showing him a series of photos. I've been documenting cases like yours. Hate crimes covered up. Suspicious deaths ruled accidents. The Harlan family's been running this county like their private kingdom for generations. Darius studied her face, looking for angles, hidden motives. He saw only determination and a familiar anger. You're not from here. Why risk it? Because someone has to. She met his gaze steadily. The truth matters, even in places like Ashfield. Especially in places like Ashfield. The waitress brought coffee neither had ordered, her hands shaking slightly as she poured. Elena waited until she was gone before continuing. Let me tell your story, she said. Not just the bar fight, everything. Your father's death, the corruption, all of it. People need to know. Darius wrapped his hands around the hot mug, thinking of his father's voice. Stand tall, even when they want you to kneel. All right, he said finally, but not here. Too many ears. Later that night, Darius sat on his front porch, methodically cleaning his Sig Sauer P226. The familiar ritual of cotton patches and gun oil helped him think. Elena's questions had stirred up memories he'd rather forget, but maybe that was necessary. Some wounds needed reopening to heal properly. A shadow moved across his overgrown lawn. Too quick, too purposeful. The brick came next, sailing through his front window in a shower of glass. Darius was already moving, weapon forgotten as he charged into the darkness. But whoever threw it was gone, leaving only the brick and its attached note. In crude red letters, matching the spray paint on his fence, it read, Next time, it'll be you. The sky was still dark when Darius pulled up to Mount Zion Baptist Church. The old brick building stood silent against the pre-dawn gloom, its stained glass windows dark and lifeless. He found Reverend Miles in his study, surrounded by towering bookshelves and the smell of old paper. I've been expecting you, Miles said, his voice soft but steady. The Reverend's weathered face showed the weight of decades. He gestured to a worn leather chair. Sit, son. We have much to discuss. Darius settled into the chair, noting how Miles moved carefully, like a man carrying invisible wounds. You said on the phone you had information about my father. Not just your father. Miles crossed to a filing cabinet in the corner. His hands trembled slightly as he withdrew a thick manila envelope. I've been keeping records. 30 years of crimes nobody wanted to remember. He spread photographs across his desk, black and white images of broken men, police reports with convenient conclusions, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Darius leaned forward, his throat tight. These are all murders, Miles finished, called suicides, accidents, or just unexplained disappearances. All black men who stood up, spoke out, or simply existed in the wrong place. He tapped one photo. James Washington, 1992. Found hanging in his garage after filing a discrimination lawsuit. Another photo. Marcus Turner, 1997. Accidental. Drowning after witnessing a deputy beating a teenager. Darius's hands clenched as he recognized faces. Men who'd visited their house when he was young, who'd disappeared one by one. How many? 43 that I know of. Miles sank heavily into his chair. Your father was number 27. Each case signed off by Buck Harlan or his deputies. Each victim's family threatened into silence. Why didn't you come forward before? Miles's eyes clouded with old pain. I tried, son. Wrote letters to the FBI, called newspapers. But Harlan's got friends in high places. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. And those who pushed too hard? He gestured to the photographs. They joined this collection. Darius picked up his father's case file, scanning the official lies. But now we have Elena Vega. She's got connections outside Harlan's reach. And you? Miles smiled faintly. You've given people hope. That bar fight did more than hurt Troy's pride. It showed folks that the Harlans can bleed. They spent the next hour planning. Miles would copy his files, Elena would build the story, and Darius would gather living witnesses, if any would talk. The sun was rising when Darius walked into Harlan's bar again. The place was empty, except for a tall black man behind the counter, methodically wiping glasses. He looked up as Darius entered, his expression carefully neutral. "We're not officially open," he said. "Just need information." Darius sat at the bar. "You're Reggie?" The bartender nodded slowly. "And you're the one who laid out Troy Harlan and his boys." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Been a long time since anybody stood up to them like that. Why do you work here?" "Same reason most folks do what they do in this town. Need to eat." Reggie set down his rag. "But I see things, hear things. Been watching the Harlans and their crew operate for years. And now? Now?" Reggie leaned forward, voice dropping. "Maybe it's time those things got said out loud. Folks been scared too long. Maybe you're what we needed. Somebody who knows how to fight back." Over the next hour, people began trickling in. Not the usual morning crowd, but others. A truck driver with scarred knuckles who'd lost a brother to police violence. A factory worker whose son disappeared after witnessing a beating. A church deacon whose nephew was found dead in a creek. They came quietly, speaking in low voices, sharing stories they'd kept buried for years. Each one had lost someone to Harlan's natural order. Each one was tired of being afraid. "We'll stand with you," the truck driver said, others nodding. "Just tell us how." Darius listened, memorized names, made connections. A network was forming, built on shared pain and the hunger for justice. By noon, he had a dozen allies and promises of more. The sun was setting when he drove past the sheriff's office, its windows glowing orange in the fading light. Through the glass, he saw Buck Harlan standing at his desk, coffee cup in hand, watching the street like a king surveying his kingdom. Their eyes met through the window. Buck's face was stone, but his fingers tightened on the cup. He knew what was coming, could feel his control slipping away like sand through his fingers. Darius held his gaze for a long moment, letting the old sheriff see the truth. His reign of terror was ending. The ghosts he'd buried were rising, and this time there would be no silent graves, no convenient explanations, no more families forced to swallow their grief. The war lines were drawn not with violence, but with truth. And truth, once unleashed, was a force no badge could stop. The church basement was cool and dim, lit by a single fluorescent tube that hummed overhead. Darius, Elena, and Reverend Miles hunched over a folding table covered with yellowed papers and faded photographs. The air felt thick with dust and secrets. "Look at this pattern," Elena said, spreading out a timeline she'd created. Her dark hair fell forward as she pointed to different dates. Every time a black family faced foreclosure or legal trouble, Harlan's department got involved, and within months, their land was sold to shell companies. Darius picked up a stack of property deeds. All these companies trace back to one name, Greystone Industries. Reverend Miles nodded slowly, his aged hands trembling as he sorted through more files. The Harlan fortune didn't come from honest police work. They've been stealing land for 3 generations. Elena pulled out her laptop, typing rapidly. "I've been digging into Greystone's financial records, Look at these transfers. She turned the screen toward them. Regular payments to the sheriff's department, labeled as security consulting. But the dates match perfectly with violent incidents against black landowners. They weren't just stealing land, Darius said, his voice tight with anger. They were funding terrorism against our people, using the badge as cover. Reverend Miles pulled out an old photo album. The pages crackled as he opened it. These were all prosperous black farms in the 1960s. He pointed to images of proud families standing before well-maintained houses and fertile fields. Now, look at the same land today. Elena pulled up satellite images on her laptop. Where farms had once flourished, industrial complexes now sprawled across the landscape. Greystone owns all of it now. They built factories on stolen ground. My father knew, Darius said quietly. That's why they killed him. He was gathering evidence, wasn't he? Miles nodded. Jeremiah was smart. He kept records, just like I did. But they found out. Elena leaned forward, her reporter's instincts firing. We need more than paper trails. We need confessions. These people have gotten away with murder because nobody could prove intent. They talk freely at the bar, Darius said, especially when they're drunk. If we could record them. Too dangerous to plant someone with a wire, Elena warned. They know all the local faces. Darius stood up, pacing the basement floor. Not if we hide it somewhere they'd never look. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Reggie, we need your help. An hour later, they met Reggie behind the bar. He'd just finished his shift, and the evening crew wouldn't arrive for another hour. Perfect timing. The jukebox, Reggie said, opening the ancient machine's cabinet. Nobody ever services it except me. I can hide a mic inside, wire it to this digital recorder. He held up a small black device. It'll capture everything within 15 feet. Darius examined the setup. How long can it record? 8 hours on one charge. I'll switch out the memory cards each morning. Elena helped Reggie position the microphone while Darius and Miles kept watch. The installation took 20 minutes. When they finished, you couldn't tell anything had been changed. Now we wait, Darius said. They didn't have to wait long. That night, Troy Harlan and his crew stumbled in, already drunk and looking for trouble. They took their usual corner table right next to the jukebox. Reggie kept their glasses full, moving with practiced invisibility as the alcohol loosened their tongues. Elena sat in a dark corner, pretending to work on her laptop. Darius watched from his truck across the street, listening through an earpiece connected to the hidden mic. Remember that Miles kid? Troy's voice came through clear as a bell. The one who thought he was too good to show respect? Laughter from his friends. Yeah, taught him proper manners, didn't we? Just like his daddy. Another voice. Rick Palmer. These people need to learn their place. Same way we taught old Jeremiah Cole, Troy bragged. Dad said that one was special. Had to make it look right. Darius's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He forced himself to stay in the truck, to let them keep talking. Your old man's a genius, Denny Palmer said. Way he handled that land deal with Greystone? Beautiful. Got rid of all them troublemakers, made us rich, and nobody could prove nothing. Ain't that the truth? Troy laughed. Why you think we got the newest patrol cars in the state? Greystone takes care of their friends. They kept talking, spilling decades of secrets, names of victims, details of crimes, amounts of payoffs, all captured by the hidden microphone. Elena typed furiously, documenting every word. Sometimes I miss the old days, Troy said, his voice slurring, when people knew their place, like that Miles boy. What was his name? Marcus? Malcolm? Michael, Rick corrected. Michael Miles. Caught him talking to my sister at the church picnic. That's right, Troy grinned. Found him walking home that night. Me and Dad showed him what happens when you don't respect boundaries. Shame about the accident afterward, Denny added, chuckling darkly. Wasn't no accident, Troy boasted. Dad said make it look like one. So we did. Just like all the others. The conversation continued, each confession more damning than the last. In his truck, Darius listened with cold fury as Troy and his friends laughed about his father's murder, about Michael Miles, about dozens of other victims whose families still grieved. The recorder captured everything, every name, every crime, every casual admission of guilt. By midnight, they had enough evidence to destroy not just the Harlans, but the entire corrupt system they'd built. Elena slipped out first, clutching her laptop like a treasure. Reggie kept serving drinks, his face a mask of practiced indifference. And Darius waited in his truck, knowing that justice was finally within reach. At dawn, Elena's laptop screen glowed in Darius's dim living room. They'd been up all night, reviewing the recordings. Hour after hour of drunken confessions spilled from the speakers, each one more damning than the last. Listen to this part again, Elena said, clicking a file. Troy Harlan's slurred voice filled the room. Dad always said, make it look natural. Suicide, accident, whatever. Long as the paperwork's clean, ain't nobody gonna look twice. Darius's jaw tightened. He stood up and paced, his military boots silent on the worn carpet. They're bragging about murder like it's a joke. Elena nodded, typing rapidly. I've counted 17 specific incidents they've mentioned. Names, dates, methods, all of it matching unsolved cases in the county records. She pulled up a spreadsheet full of details. And look at this pattern with Greystone Industries. Every time they removed someone, Greystone bought the land within months. How are we releasing this? Darius asked. I've prepared anonymous packages for every major network, Elena said. Plus selected reporters I trust. Once it hits the wire services, it'll spread fast. She pressed a key. And sent. They waited, watching news sites and social media. At first, nothing. Then, just after lunch, the dam broke. Breaking, shocking audio reveals decades of police violence in Mississippi town. Murder, corruption, and land theft. Small town's dark secret exposed. Sheriff's Department implicated in systematic racial violence. The stories spread like wildfire. Within hours, protesters gathered outside the courthouse, their signs demanding justice. News vans clogged Main Street, reporters doing live shots with the Confederate statue in the background. Darius watched from his porch as more people arrived. Not just locals, but activists and journalists from across the state. The air crackled with energy. Change was coming to Ashfield, ready or not. His phone buzzed constantly. Black residents he'd known as a child called to thank him, to offer support, to share their own stories of abuse. You did what we've been scared to do for years, Reverend Miles told him. You gave us our voice back. Elena monitored the media coverage from her laptop. Look at this, she said, turning up the volume on a news clip. Sheriff Buck Harlan stood at a podium, his silver hair perfectly combed, his badge gleaming. But his usual smooth confidence seemed strained. These alleged recordings are clearly fabricated, he declared. Manufactured by outside agitators who want to destroy our peaceful community. We categorically deny any wrongdoing. He's scared, Darius observed. Look at his hands. They're shaking. Elena's phone rang. It was Warren Keyes, her contact at the Regional Herald. Elena, this is explosive stuff, he said. We're running it front page tomorrow. Don't worry about blowback. I'll make sure you're protected. Both of you. Can we trust him? Darius asked after she hung up. Warren's solid, Elena assured him. He's broken big stories before. He knows how to handle this. They spent the afternoon documenting more evidence. Elena interviewed longtime residents who'd lost land to Greystone. Darius mapped out connections between suspicious deaths and property transfers. The truth was finally coming to light. Around sunset, Darius stepped outside for some air. A black SUV roared past his house, engine revving. He tensed, combat instincts kicking in. The vehicle swerved suddenly, mounting the curb and accelerating straight at him. Darius dove and rolled, feeling the wind from the SUV as it missed him by inches. It crashed through his fence and sped away, leaving tire tracks across his lawn. No license plate visible. He pulled himself up, checking for injuries. Just scrapes and bruises. Elena ran outside, phone already dialing 911. "Don't bother," Darius said. "They won't do anything." "This is getting dangerous," Elena said. "They're desperate now." Back inside, they double-checked the security of their evidence files. Elena had encrypted everything, storing copies on multiple secure servers. "Even if they get to our computers, the truth is already out there," she said. Her phone chimed, a message from an unknown number. Elena's face went pale as she read it. Without a word, she turned the screen toward Darius. 2 simple words. "They know." "Warren?" Darius asked. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she set down the phone. "Has to be. He's the only one who knew the full scope." She took a deep breath. "I thought I could trust him. I've known him for years." "Trust is expensive in this town," Darius said grimly. He checked his weapon, then began securing the windows. The sun was setting, painting long shadows across the floor. They both knew darkness was coming, in more ways than one. Elena kept working, her fingers flying across the keyboard. They can't stop what's already in motion. The story's too big now. But her voice held a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Outside, more vehicles cruised past the house, moving slowly, deliberately, watching, waiting. The war for Ashfield's soul was entering a new phase, and the enemy had just shown their hand. Night fell over Ashfield like a heavy curtain. Elena's old Honda crept through the empty streets toward the Regional Herald's office. Something felt wrong. The building should have been lit up with the night shift working, but every window was dark. She parked in the empty lot, her headlights catching the metal sign, "Regional Herald, serving our community since 1952. The fluorescent security light buzzed overhead, creating harsh shadows. "Warren?" she called, pushing open the unlocked front door. "Anyone here?" Her footsteps echoed in the silent newsroom. Desks sat empty, computers dark, coffee cups left half full, chairs pushed back as if everyone had left in a hurry. Her skin prickled with unease. A noise from the back office made her freeze. "Hello?" Suddenly, the overhead lights blazed on. Elena squinted against the glare. Heavy boots thumped on linoleum. 3 men in deputy uniforms emerged from different doorways, surrounding her. She recognized Rick and Denny Palmer, the racist twins from the bar. The third was a burly deputy she didn't know. "Well, well," Rick drawled. "Look who came sniffing around." Elena backed toward the door, but Denny was already there, blocking her escape. Her laptop bag felt heavy on her shoulder. "Where's Warren?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Keyes received a generous offer to take an early retirement," the burly deputy said. "Sheriff Harlan can be very persuasive when it comes to protecting this town's interests." Elena's stomach dropped. Warren had sold them out. All those years of trust, friendship, shared stories, worthless against a fat envelope of cash. "Hand over the laptop," Rick said, stepping closer. "Nice and easy." "Go to hell." Elena swung her bag like a weapon, catching Rick in the face. She darted past him, but Denny grabbed her hair, yanking her back. The laptop clattered to the floor. They were rough, professional. No permanent damage, but enough force to make their point. When they finished, Elena lay curled on the floor, tasting blood from her split lip. Rick stomped on her laptop, crushing it. "Message from the sheriff," the burly deputy said, crouching beside her. "Stop digging, or next time won't be so gentle." He dropped a handful of papers beside her, printouts of her encrypted files. Warren had given them everything. They left her there, taking the broken laptop. Elena waited until their cars pulled away before fumbling for her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed. "Darius," she whispered when he answered. "Help." He found her 15 minutes later, still huddled on the newsroom floor. His face hardened at the sight of her bruises. Without a word, he helped her up, supporting her weight. "Warren betrayed us," she managed. "They have everything. Can you walk?" When she nodded, he led her quickly to his truck. "They'll be back. We need to move." They drove out of town, taking back roads into the dense woods. Elena's whole body ached. She kept seeing Warren's betrayal in her mind. Years of friendship sold for a price. Darius's phone rang. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he listened. "Understood. We're coming." He ended the call, jaw clenched. They burned down Miles's church. "What?" Elena sat up straighter despite the pain. "Is he?" "Alive. Barely. Some parishioners found him inside, overcome by smoke. He's at County General." They turned onto a dirt road, branches scraping the truck's sides. Darius's usual calm had cracked, revealing something darker underneath. Raw fury blazed in his eyes. "This ends tonight," he growled. "No more playing nice." The old hunting cabin appeared through the trees, a small wooden structure, weathered but solid. Darius helped Elena inside, checking the perimeter before locking up. The cabin was basic: 2 rooms, some furniture, a wood stove. But it was secure. Elena sank onto a worn couch, finally letting the tears come. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "This is my fault. I trusted Warren. I put everyone in danger." "No." Darius knelt in front of her, his voice firm. "You exposed the truth. That's what they're afraid of. They burned down a church, Darius. They could have killed Miles. They've been killing people for decades." He cleaned her split lip with gentle hands, his touch at odds with the steel in his voice. "But this time is different. This time they picked the wrong fight." Elena looked at him through tears. The hardened soldier she'd first met was gone. In his place was something more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and a lifetime of combat skills to unleash. "What do we do now?" Darius finished tending her wounds, then stood. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, emergency sirens wailed, probably heading to the burning church. "They started this war," he said, checking his weapon. "I'll finish it." The night pressed against the cabin windows, thick and humid. Elena huddled on the couch, watching Darius prepare. Her body ached, but her spirit was unbroken. Whatever came next, there would be no more running. Dawn painted the sky in shades of gray as Darius crept through his old neighborhood. The streets were empty, silent except for distant dogs barking. His mother's house loomed ahead, a shadow against the lightening sky. Inside those walls lay proof of Buck Harlan's corruption, files he'd hidden beneath loose floorboards years ago. Moving like a ghost, Darius slipped through the back door. The house smelled of dust and abandonment. He headed straight for the living room, counting floorboards from the wall. 3 across, 4 down. The wood creaked as he pried it up. A twig snapped outside. Darius froze, his combat instincts screaming danger. Boots crunched on dead leaves, multiple sets, trying to move quietly and failing. He counted at least 6 distinct patterns. They had the house surrounded. "Come on out, Cole," Buck Harlan's voice carried through the morning air. We can do this easy or hard. Darius's hand found the hidden compartment, fingers closing around a thick manila envelope. He tucked it into his jacket, just as the first window shattered. A canister rolled across the floor, spewing tear gas. He pulled his shirt over his nose, but his eyes burned. Through watering vision, he saw shadows moving outside each window. The front door splintered under a battering ram. Deputies poured in, weapons raised. Darius moved on instinct, decades of close-quarters combat training taking over. He caught the first deputy with an elbow strike, using the man's momentum to throw him into two others. A taser probe missed his chest by inches. "Take him down!" someone shouted. Darius fought like a caged tiger. He disarmed one deputy, broke another's nose, drove his knee into a third's solar plexus. But there were too many. A taser finally found its mark, electricity shooting through his body. His muscles locked up. They swarmed him then, boots and fists raining down. Darius curled around the envelope, protecting it even as they beat him. Through swollen eyes, he saw Buck Harlan watching from the doorway, smoking a cigarette. "That's enough," Buck said finally. "Load him up." They dragged Darius to a waiting van, his feet leaving trails in the dirt. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across his childhood home. They drove out of town, past empty fields and abandoned buildings, until they reached the old cotton mill. Darius's heart clenched. This was where they'd found his father's body, hanging from a beam. Suicide, they'd called it. He knew better. The mill's interior was dark, dusty. Rusted machinery loomed like prehistoric monsters. They tied him to a wooden chair beneath the same beam where Jeremiah Cole had died. Blood dripped from Darius's split lip onto his shirt. Buck Harlan pulled up another chair, sitting backward on it. He looked almost grandfatherly in the dim light, but his eyes were cold as snake scales. "You know," Buck said conversationally, "your daddy sat in that same spot 20 years ago. Proud man, Jeremiah. Wouldn't listen to reason." "Don't say his name," Darius growled. Buck ignored him. "See, there's a natural order to things. Some folks just can't accept that. Your daddy couldn't. Now, you can't. And look where it got you both." He stood, pacing slowly around Darius's chair. "This town works a certain way, has for generations. People know their place, follow the rules. Everything runs smooth. But there's always someone who wants to stir things up." "You mean someone who stands up to murdering cowards?" A deputy slapped Darius hard across the face. Buck held up a hand. Now, let's be civil." "Civil?" Darius spat blood. "Like when you lynched my father?" "Your father hung himself," Buck said smoothly. "Just like you're going to. Guilt over all this trouble you caused, I expect?" Tragic story, really. The morning light filtered through broken windows, casting bars across the floor. Darius could hear birds singing outside, oblivious to the darkness within these walls. "You should have stayed gone, son," Buck said, almost sadly. "Could have lived a long life somewhere else, but you had to come back, dig up old bones." Darius raised his head, meeting Buck's gaze. Despite his injuries, his voice was steady. "You should have stayed afraid." Buck's false warmth vanished. "Afraid? Of you?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Look around, boy. You're done. No one's coming to help. No one even knows you're here." He nodded to his deputies. "Keep him company till dawn. Then make it look convincing." Buck walked out, boots echoing on concrete. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, painting golden squares on the dusty floor. Darius closed his eyes, feeling the rope bite into his wrists. "Jeremiah," he whispered, his father's name a prayer in the musty air. Then his training kicked in. He began cataloging everything. The loose knot on his left wrist, the rusty nail near his foot, the deputy's keys hanging just within reach if he could get free. His muscles ached, but his mind was clear. They thought they had him beaten, just like they'd thought they'd beaten his father. But Darius had survived worse places than this, against better men than these. As the deputies settled in to wait for dawn, he began working the rope against the nail, millimeter by millimeter. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left him alive. And as long as he was breathing, this wasn't over. The mill's shadows lengthened as afternoon crept toward evening. Darius's arms burned from the ropes, but he kept working them against the rusty nail. The other deputies had stepped outside to smoke, leaving only one guard, the youngest, who kept shifting his weight and glancing at Darius with uncertain eyes. "What's your name, deputy?" Darius asked softly. The young man hesitated before answering. "Caleb. Caleb Morris." "How long you been wearing that badge, Caleb?" 8 months. Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. Darius nodded slowly. "You believe in what you're doing here?" "Really believe in it?" Caleb's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his gun belt. "I joined to help people, to protect and serve, like they say. That what this looks like to you? Protection and service?" Darius's voice remained calm, but his words cut deep. "Look around this mill, Caleb. Look at these walls. They killed my father here, called it suicide. How many others died the same way? How many bodies buried in unmarked graves because they stood up to Buck Harlan?" Sweat beaded on Caleb's forehead. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. They're using you, son. Same way they've used every young deputy who thought they could change things from the inside. You're just another pawn to them, another uniform to hide behind while they keep their boot on people's necks." Caleb paced the floor, conflict etched on his face. "You don't understand. Buck has connections everywhere. The mayor, the judges, business owners. Cross him, and you're finished in this town." "I understand perfectly," Darius said. "That's how tyranny works. It makes good men afraid to do what's right. Makes them complicit in evil because standing up costs too much." The young deputy stopped pacing. His hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "2 days ago, I found this in Buck's office. Was doing some filing and I shouldn't have looked, but you did look," Darius finished, "and what you saw changed everything." Caleb nodded, his face pale. "Records going back 30 years. Bribes, cover-ups, murders disguised as accidents. Names of everyone involved, even—" He swallowed hard. "Even photos. Trophies they kept." Darius leaned forward in his chair. "You know what has to happen now, Caleb. Question is, can you live with yourself if you do nothing?" Silence stretched between them. Outside, they could hear the other deputies laughing, sharing crude jokes. Caleb's hand moved to his knife. "They'll kill me if they find out," he whispered. "They'll kill you anyway someday," Darius replied. "When you know too much, or grow a conscience they can't control. At least this way, you die standing for something." The knife blade touched the ropes. Caleb's hands steadied as he made his choice. "The electrical box is behind that column," he muttered, cutting faster. "Main breakers labeled in red. There's a Glock in the desk drawer by the door." The ropes fell away. Darius rubbed his wrists, nodding gratefully. "You're doing the right thing. Just—" Caleb pressed the USB drive into Darius's hand. "Make it count. Make them pay." Darius moved silently to the electrical box. "When the lights go out, hit the floor and stay there. I won't hurt you, but I can't say the same if you get in my way." He threw the breaker. Darkness crashed down like a wave. The deputies outside shouted in surprise. Footsteps pounded on concrete as they rushed back in. "Morris! You okay in there?" Darius moved like a shadow through the darkness, his combat training taking over. He struck the first deputy in the throat, caught the second with a leg sweep. The third managed to draw his weapon before Darius's elbow connected with his temple. Bodies hit the floor. Confusion reigned in the darkness. Darius found the desk, retrieved the Glock. He checked the magazine. Full. "What the hell's going on?" someone shouted. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Darius dropped low, circling behind the last deputy. One quick strike, and it was over. He paused by Caleb, who lay trembling on the floor. "Remember what I said. Do right by your conscience." Then he was gone, slipping out through a broken window into the gathering dusk. Sirens wailed in the distance as he sprinted for the tree line. The woods swallowed him like a ghost. Elena was pacing the cabin floor when he arrived, her face tight with worry. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, hugging him fiercely. "When you didn't come back, I thought—" "I'm okay," he assured her, wincing at his injuries. "And I brought us something." He handed her the USB drive. Elena's hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. Files populated the screen, hundreds of them. Financial records, police reports, photographs, video clips. Names, dates, locations. A web of corruption laid bare in cold digital clarity. This is everything," Elena whispered. "Every crime, every cover-up, every payoff. My God, there are senators implicated in this." Darius checked the Glock's action, making sure it was clean. His voice was steel. "Time to end it where it started." Elena looked up from the screen, her eyes hard. "The bar?" He nodded, loading fresh rounds into the magazine. "The bar." Thunder rolled across Ashfield as Darius's truck crawled through the darkening streets. Elena sat beside him, checking her equipment. 3 wireless cameras, a mobile hotspot, and her laptop loaded with streaming software. "You sure about this?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Darius's grip tightened on the wheel. "My father died because nobody was watching. Not this time." They parked behind Harlan's bar. The neon sign buzzed weakly in the growing storm, casting red shadows across rain-slicked pavement. Through the windows, they could see Reggie wiping down glasses, pretending not to notice them. "Give me 15 minutes to set up," Elena said, gathering her gear. She slipped in through the back door while Darius waited in the truck, watching lightning flash across the sky. His phone vibrated. He typed out the message slowly, deliberately. "Meet me at Harlan's bar. Alone. Time to finish what you started 30 years ago." He hit send, knowing Buck Harlan wouldn't be able to resist the challenge. Inside, Elena worked quickly, hiding small cameras in strategic spots. One above the bar, one near the entrance, one covering the back corner where it all began. She connected them to her laptop, testing angles and feeds. The first viewers started trickling in as she went live, numbers climbing steadily. Darius entered through the front door exactly 15 minutes later. The few early customers fell silent, watching him cross to the bar. Reggie's hands shook slightly as he poured the whiskey. Neat, just like before. "You don't have to stay," Darius told him quietly. Reggie straightened his spine. "Yes, sir, I do. Been hiding from these people too long." More locals filtered in, drawn by the growing tension. Word spread through town like wildfire. Something was about to happen at Harlan's. Deputies arrived in pairs, hands hovering near their weapons. Nobody made a move toward Darius. They'd all heard what happened to Troy's gang. Elena's viewer count hit 10,000, then 20. Social media exploded as people shared the link. Comments scrolled past like a waterfall. "What's happening? Who is this guy? Isn't this where that racist gang got beat down?" Darius stood at the bar, exactly where he'd stood that first night. Same spot, same drink, same calm exterior hiding the storm inside. But this time, he wasn't alone. This time, the world was watching. Rick and Denny Palmer slunk in, their deputy badges gleaming dully. They huddled in a corner, casting nervous glances at Darius. Their broken noses and black eyes hadn't fully healed. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain drummed against the roof. Elena's camera caught every detail. The sweat on people's foreheads, the tension in their shoulders, the way conversations died to whispers. 30,000 viewers, she murmured into her phone, updating Darius. News networks are picking up the feed. A truck's headlights swept across the windows. The door creaked open, and Troy Harlan stumbled in, his arm still in a cast. His face was flushed with alcohol and fear poorly disguised as anger. He tried to draw his gun, but his hands were shaking too badly. "Sit down, son," Darius said, without turning around. "You already know how this ends." Troy's face twisted with rage, but he backed away, finding a seat near his friends. The bar had grown crowded now. It seemed like half the town was packed inside, pressed against walls, watching history unfold. Elena's viewer count topped 50,000. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. Local news vans appeared outside, their lights cutting through the rain. Darius took another slow sip of whiskey. Lightning flashed, illuminating the Confederate flag still hanging behind the bar. He remembered his father's face, remembered his mother's tears, remembered 30 years of silence and fear. 70,000, Elena whispered. "Keep stalling. People are recording this everywhere." The storm growled overhead like an angry beast. Rain rattled the windows. The air grew thick with cigarette smoke and anticipation. Darius checked his phone, a message from Reverend Miles. "The whole world's watching now. God be with you." Headlights again, but different this time, the unmistakable shape of a police cruiser. The bar fell completely silent. Even the storm seemed to pause. Heavy boots on wet pavement. A shadow crossed the door. The hinges squealed as Sheriff Buck Harlan stepped inside, his son Troy right behind him. Both men carried guns openly, Buck's service weapon on his hip, Troy clutching a revolver in his good hand. Water dripped from Buck's hat brim as he surveyed the scene. His eyes narrowed at the cameras, at Elena's laptop, at the phones recording from every angle. But when he looked at Darius, his face showed only cold hatred. 100,000 people watched through Elena's feed as the two men faced each other across the bar where it all began. 3 decades of buried crimes and hidden bodies hung between them like smoke. Buck's hand settled on his gun. "You should have stayed gone, boy." Darius turned slowly, his expression carved from stone. The whole town held its breath, watching the moment when everything would finally change. Buck's weathered face twisted into a mocking smile. "You think anyone's going to believe the ravens of some outsider? This is my town. Always has been. Your town?" Darius's voice carried across the silent bar. "Let's see what your town thinks about this." He pressed a button on his phone. The TV screens mounted around the bar flickered to life. Security footage from the mill appeared first, showing Buck and his deputies dragging Darius inside. More screens lit up in sequence, displaying decades of carefully hidden evidence. "These files were in your office, Sheriff," Elena's voice narrated through the speakers. "Bank transfers from Greystone Industries to offshore accounts. Death certificates falsified under your authority. 30 years of covered-up murders, all bearing your signature." Buck's smug expression cracked as photographs filled the screens. Black men found hanging, ruled suicides, burning crosses on front lawns, deputies posing with bloody batons. Each image was time-stamped, documented, undeniable. "That's right," Darius said quietly. "Every dirty secret, every covered-up crime. Live streaming to over 100,000 people right now." The crowd pressed against the walls, phones recording everything. Some deputies shifted uncomfortably, looking between Buck and the damning evidence. "Here's an interesting one," Elena continued. The screens showed old land deeds. Property stolen from black families in the 1990s, falsified charges, forced sales, all ending up in Harlan family hands, including this bar we're standing in. Buck's face had gone pale. "This proves nothing. I've got witnesses who'll—" "Like these witnesses?" A new video played. Troy and his gang at the bar, drunk and boasting about past violence. Their own voices betrayed them. "Remember that Miles boy? Made sure he'd never testify." "Shut it off!" Buck roared. "Deputies! Arrest him! Now!" But half the deputies didn't move. Young Caleb Morris stepped forward, removing his badge. "No, sir. Not this time." He walked to stand beside Darius. Other deputies followed, the scales of fear finally outweighed by conscience. The Palmer twins backed away, looking lost without clear orders to follow. Rain hammered the roof as lightning flashed. The viewer count topped 200,000. Comments flooded in from across the country. "Justice! Arrest the sheriff! Finally! Your own son confessed it all," Darius said, pointing to another screen where Troy's drunken voice described his father's system of bribes and threats. "The whole operation, recorded right here in this bar." Buck's hand tightened on his gun. "You think some videos change anything? I still run this county. My friends in the State House are already under federal investigation," Elena cut in. "The FBI has everything. They're watching this live stream too. Check your phone, Sheriff. Feel those walls closing in?" Buck's phone was indeed buzzing constantly. His face twisted with rage as he read the messages. Everything was unraveling, his carefully built empire of fear crumbling in real time. Troy, sweating and wild-eyed, raised his revolver with his good hand. "Shut up! Just shut up!" His voice cracked with panic. "Put it down, son," Darius warned. "Don't make this worse." "Troy," Buck barked. "Don't—" But Troy was beyond hearing. The gun shook in his grip as he squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, grazing Darius's left arm. Darius dove and flipped a heavy oak table for cover. Screams erupted as people stampeded toward the exits. Bottles shattered behind the bar as more shots rang out. "Hold your fire!" Caleb shouted, drawing his weapon. Other deputies did the same, but chaos had already exploded through the room. Tables overturned, chairs flew. The Palmer twins scrambled for cover behind the bar with Reggie, who was already calling 911. Elena kept filming, her camera catching every moment as the bar descended into mayhem. 250,000 watching, she called out. "Everything live!" Buck tried to restore order, but his authority had evaporated. His commands were drowned out by the sound of approaching sirens and the continuing storm. Troy fired wildly, bullets splintering wood and shattering mirrors. People pressed against the walls or huddled under tables. The viewer count climbed higher as the world watched Ashfield's power structure implode. Through the chaos, Darius's voice cut clear and steady. "It's over, Buck. You can't bury the truth this time." The old Confederate flag behind the bar caught a stray bullet and fell, landing in a puddle of spilled whiskey and broken glass. The cameras caught the symbolism perfectly. The old order literally falling as justice finally arrived in Ashfield. More shots rang out as Troy's panic spread to the few deputies still loyal to Buck. The bar became a war zone of flying bottles, overturned furniture, and terrified screams. Buck looked around frantically, watching decades of control dissolve into anarchy. His phone kept buzzing, likely with news of federal agents already entering the county. The truth he'd buried for so long was blazing across screens worldwide. and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Darius stayed behind his cover, blood seeping through his sleeve where Troy's bullet had grazed him. But his eyes never left Buck's face, watching the realization sink in that everything was about to change. The storm raged outside as sirens grew closer. Through the windows, emergency lights began to flash, painting the chaos in strobes of red and blue. Through the smoky haze of gunfire, Darius moved with deadly precision. His military training took over, each motion calculated and efficient. The wound on his arm barely registered as he focused on the threats around him. Troy stumbled backward, still firing wildly. His shots punched holes in the ceiling and shattered the neon beer signs, sending sparks and glass raining down. The bar strobed with emergency lights from outside, casting everything in surreal flashes of red and blue. "Drop it, Troy!" Darius commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. But Troy's eyes were wide with panic, beyond reason. Darius ghosted through the debris, closing the distance. Troy's next shot went wide, and in that split second, Darius struck. His hand clamped around Troy's gun wrist, twisting sharply. The weapon clattered to the floor as Troy howled in pain. Before Troy could react, Darius's elbow connected with his temple. The sheriff's son crumpled like a marionette with cut strings, unconscious before he hit the sticky floor. "Anyone else?" Darius called out, scanning the room. Two of Buck's loyal deputies rushed him from different angles. The first swung a broken bottle, but Darius slipped past the attack, redirecting the man's momentum into a table. The second deputy managed to grab Darius from behind, but years of close-quarters combat had prepared him for this. Darius dropped his weight, breaking the hold, then swept the deputy's legs. As the man fell, Darius caught his arm and twisted, forcing him to flip onto his stomach. A precise strike to the back of the head, and another threat was neutralized. "Keep that camera steady," Elena shouted to someone in the crowd. She'd taken cover behind an overturned pool table but kept narrating for the live stream. "Over 300,000 watching now. Federal agents are responding." Buck Harlan, backed against the bar, fired his revolver in desperation. The shot went wild, striking one of his own deputies in the leg. The man screamed and fell, clutching his bleeding thigh. "Your own men, Buck?" Darius advanced steadily, using tables and support columns for cover. "That's always been your way, hasn't it? Sacrifice anyone to save yourself." More bottles exploded as Buck kept shooting. Glass and alcohol rained down, making the floor treacherous. The remaining customers pressed themselves flat against the walls or crawled toward the exits. "You don't understand nothing," Buck shouted, his composure finally cracking. "I built this town. Everything I did was to keep order." "Order?" Darius's voice dripped with contempt. "You mean fear. But look around, Buck. Your fears got no power anymore." He gestured to the phones recording everything, to Elena's professional camera catching every detail. The world was watching Ashfield's corrupt sheriff break down in real time. Buck's eyes darted to the back door. Darius saw the calculation in his face and moved to cut off his escape route. But Buck had one more card to play. He grabbed Reggie, the bartender, putting the gun to his head. "Back off, or I swear I'll—" Darius didn't hesitate. While Buck was focused on him, Caleb Morris had circled behind the bar. The young deputy brought his baton down hard on Buck's gun arm. Reggie twisted free as the weapon clattered away. "You ungrateful little—" Buck started to snarl at Caleb, but Darius was already moving. His first strike knocked Buck back against the bottles. The second drove the wind from his lungs. The third, and precise hit to the jaw, sent the sheriff sprawling across his own bar. "It's done, Buck," Darius said quietly. "Your kind of justice is finished in Ashfield." But Buck wasn't finished. He pulled a backup revolver from his ankle holster, eyes wild with hate. "To hell with all of you!" The door burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised, shouting commands. Buck spun toward them, gun raised. "Sheriff Harlan!" an agent bellowed. "Drop your weapon!" Time seemed to slow. Buck's finger tightened on the trigger. Darius tensed to move. But before either could act, a single shot cracked through the chaos. Buck jerked, his revolver falling as blood spread across his shoulder. He collapsed against the bar, clutching the wound. Behind him stood Caleb Morris, his service weapon still smoking. "That's for every person you made me hurt," Caleb said, his voice shaking but firm. The federal agents swarmed in, securing the scene. They cuffed Buck as medics rushed to treat his shoulder. More agents led Troy's unconscious form and the other subdued deputies outside to waiting vehicles. Elena pushed through the crowd, her camera capturing everything. "Sir," she called to the lead agent, "can you confirm this is part of a larger federal investigation into corruption in Ashfield?" "No comment at this time," the agent replied professionally. "But we've been watching that live stream. Good work." He nodded to both Elena and Darius. Outside, the storm was breaking. Rain pounded the parking lot as red and blue lights painted the puddles. News vans were already arriving, drawn by the viral broadcast of justice finally reaching this small corner of Mississippi. Darius watched as Buck was led out in handcuffs, head bowed, finally stripped of his power. The old sheriff looked small now, just another corrupt man facing consequences at last. The rain intensified as federal agents led Buck Harlan and his son to separate vehicles. Their hands were cuffed behind their backs, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Townspeople gathered despite the downpour, pressing against the police tape, phones raised to capture the historic moment. Elena stood under the bar's awning, her camera steady as she reported live. "The viewer count just passed 1 million, she announced, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. Buck Harlan's decades-long reign of terror in Ashfield is officially over. Darius leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene unfold. His arm throbbed where Troy's bullet had grazed him, but the paramedic had already cleaned and bandaged it. The pain felt distant, unimportant compared to the weight lifting from his shoulders. More vehicles arrived, unmarked FBI cars and news vans from every major network in the state. Agents in windbreakers marked FBI streamed into the sheriff's office across the street, emerging with boxes of files and hard drives. "Major Cole!" A reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone extended. "How does it feel to be vindicated?" Before Darius could answer, more questions flew at him. "Did you plan this confrontation? Were you working with federal authorities? What message do you have for other corrupt officials?" Elena stepped in front of him protectively. "Major Cole will make a full statement later. Right now, he's cooperating with the ongoing investigation." Inside the bar, forensics teams photographed bullet holes and collected shell casings. Caleb Morris sat with federal agents, giving his statement about years of witnessed corruption. Other deputies came forward too, their fear of Buck finally broken. Darius's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Reverend Miles was awake. He slipped away from the chaos and drove through the rain-slicked streets to the medical center. He found Miles propped up in bed, watching the news coverage on the room's small TV. The old Reverend's face was bruised, but his eyes were bright with triumph. "You did it, son," Miles said as Darius entered. "You broke their power." "We all did it," Darius corrected, taking the chair beside the bed. "Your records, Elena's reporting, Caleb's courage, it took everyone." Miles nodded at the TV, where footage from the bar fight played on repeat. "Look at those viewing numbers. The whole country's seeing what we lived with. No more hiding it." A nurse came in to check Miles's vitals, pausing to squeeze Darius's shoulder. "My daddy worked at that mill with your father," she said softly. Thank you for making them answer for what they did. By evening, the story had exploded. Elena's comprehensive article, detailing 30 years of corruption and violence, ran on every major news site. Her former paper issued a public apology for firing her, offering her job back with a promotion. She declined, announcing plans to start her own investigative news site focused on exposing systemic injustice. The FBI's initial statement confirmed a years-long investigation into the Harlan family and their connections to Greystone Industries. They'd been building a case slowly, but Darius's confrontation and the viral livestream forced their hand. Sometimes justice needs a push, the lead agent told reporters. Major Cole's actions, while risky, cracked open a case that might have taken years more to solve through traditional channels. Changes swept through Ashfield like the cleansing rain. The city council held an emergency session, voting to remove the Confederate statue from the courthouse square. Schools began the process of renaming streets that honored known racists. The bar itself was bought by a black business owner who promised to transform it into a community gathering space. 3 days after the showdown, Darius visited his father's grave again. The cemetery was peaceful in the early morning light. Someone had left fresh flowers. He wasn't the only one remembering those lost to Buck's regime. He knelt by the headstone, running his fingers over the engraved name, Jeremiah Cole, beloved husband and father. From his pocket, he took his military dog tags, the metal warm from his body heat. "You always taught me to stand up for what's right," he said quietly, laying the tags against the stone. "Even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous. I carried that lesson through every combat zone, every mission." He paused, throat tight. "But the hardest fight was right here at home, the one you started." A cardinal landed on a nearby branch, its red feathers bright against the green leaves. Darius watched it for a moment before continuing. "They tried to bury the truth with you, Pop. Tried to make your death mean nothing. But we dug it up. Every lie, every cover-up, every crime they thought they'd gotten away with, it's all in the light now." He traced his father's name again, remembering the proud man who'd refused to bow to injustice, even when it cost him everything. "The feds found your case files. Buck's confession is on tape now. Everyone knows it wasn't suicide. Your name is clear." Darius's voice grew stronger. "And Ashfield's changing. Really changing this time. Young folks are speaking up. Old wounds are healing. Your grandkids, when I have them, they'll grow up in a different kind of town." The cardinal took flight, disappearing into the morning sky. Darius stood, brushing grass from his knees. His dog tags caught the sunlight, glinting against the gray stone like a promise kept. "Rest now, Pop," he whispered. "We're free." 6 months had passed since the night that changed Ashfield forever. Summer heat shimmered off the newly paved streets as Darius stood on his mother's front porch, admiring the fresh paint and restored woodwork. The old house looked alive again, its windows gleaming, flower beds bursting with colors his mother would have loved. Across the street, kids played basketball, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. No parents watched nervously from windows anymore. No patrol cars crept by to harass them. The neighborhood breathed easier, like a weight had been lifted from its collective shoulders. "Looking good, Major," Mrs. Washington called from next door, watering her roses. The elderly woman had lived there since Darius was a boy, surviving the worst of Buck Harlan's reign. Now she tended her garden without fear, proud and straight-backed in the sunshine. Darius waved back, checking his watch. Almost time for his meeting at Cole's place. The name still made him smile. The old bar's transformation mirrored the town's own renewal. Where Confederate flags once hung, local artists' work now brightened the walls. The jukebox played everything from blues to country to hip-hop, and nobody complained. He drove downtown, noting the changes along the way. The courthouse statue was gone, replaced by a memorial garden honoring victims of racial violence. The sheriff's office had a new sign: Community First Policing. Deputy Caleb Morris, recently promoted to interim sheriff, was making good on his promises of reform. Cole's place was busy for a Thursday afternoon. Reggie Brown stood behind the bar, mixing drinks with practiced ease. The former Marine had taken ownership naturally, turning the space into what he called a living room for the whole town. "The usual?" Reggie asked as Darius took his seat, the same spot where everything had started that fateful night. "You know it." Darius settled in, watching the diverse crowd. Black and white factory workers shared plates of wings. Young professionals typed on laptops. A group of veterans, some of Darius's mentees, played pool in the corner. The door chimed, and Elena walked in, holding a package under her arm. Her face glowed with triumph as she slid onto the stool next to Darius. "Hot off the press," she announced, unwrapping a hardcover book. The title read, "Awakening Ashfield: How One Town Confronted Its Demons and Found Redemption." Darius picked it up, feeling its weight. "Looks good. Your publisher must be happy." "Pre-orders are through the roof." Elena ordered an iced tea. "But that's not even the best part. Remember that grant proposal we submitted? For the youth center? We got it." She pulled out her tablet, showing him the approval email. "Full funding for 3 years. We can start the mentorship program next month." Darius nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. He'd been working with local veterans informally, helping them channel their training and discipline into community service. Now they could do it properly, reaching more kids who needed guidance. The afternoon crowd thinned as evening approached. Through the windows, Darius watched the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The same view he'd seen that first night, but everything else had changed. "Mail came for you," Reggie said, sliding an envelope across the bar. The return address showed the Department of Justice. Inside was a formal letter confirming Buck Harlan's sentencing. 30 years without parole. His son, Troy, got 15. The corrupt network they'd built was dismantled, with more arrests still coming as investigations continued. "Justice system finally working like it should," Reggie commented, wiping down the bar. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Speaking of justice," Elena added, "did you hear about Greystone Industries? The shareholders voted to create a reparation fund for families who lost their land. They're returning properties or paying fair market value, plus damages." The news settled over them like a blessing. Darius thought of his father, imagining his proud smile. Jeremiah Cole had died fighting this fight, but his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. The evening regulars started filtering in. Among them was Reverend Miles, walking with a cane but standing tall. The old pastor had become a symbol of resilience, his rebuilt church now a center for community healing. "Your daddy would love this place," Miles said, taking a seat near Darius. "Remember how he used to say everyone deserves a table to sit at, a glass to drink from? And respect while they do it," Darius finished. The lesson had stayed with him through war zones and combat missions. Now it was helping rebuild his hometown. Through the open door came the sounds of children playing, people greeting neighbors, cars passing peacefully. Normal sounds, but they meant everything. This was what freedom felt like. Not just the absence of fear, but the presence of possibility. Reggie turned on the evening lights, their warm glow reflecting off the polished bar. The jukebox played soft blues, a local artist's soulful voice filling the room. On the walls, photographs told Ashfield's story, the pain, the fight, and finally, the victory. As the sun sank lower, painting the sky in deep purples, Darius raised his empty glass. Reggie understood without words, pouring another measure of amber liquid. "Whiskey," Darius said quietly. "Neat. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.